In this video, we address what is easily the most significant question in relation to the spiritual destiny of humankind. Therefore, a warm and joyful welcome to everyone who would be interested. Even though religiosity is universal, and in our times, religious fervor seems to be increasing everywhere, there is no guarantee that it is based on a proper and adequate understanding of what truly constitutes the religious sense. Here, of course, I make a distinction between religious practices, religious observances on the one hand, and religious sense on the other. In ideal situations, there is a blend of practice and sense. But in times of religious decay, when shallowness prevails over everything else, when appearance is all that people care for, then there is an increasing gulf or chasm between sense and practice. Therefore, if people are asked, or if you ask people why they are doing whatever they are doing in the name of God, in the name of religion, in all likelihood, you would hit the dead end. And my extensive experiences in this field, spread over at least half a century, convince me that we are living in such a time, and therefore it is particularly important for us to seek clarity regarding the sense of what we practice, or what we are required to practice, or what we expect others to practice. Unfortunately, what happens in religion is that religious duties are thrust upon people without ever bothering to explain to them why they should do what they are required to do and what sense it should make in their life. Therefore, people at best comply with religious obligations and duties in a mechanical sense. Now, when I say in a mechanical sense, I mean they oblige, they comply with, but without understanding the meaning of what they are doing or why they should be doing what they are required to do. And there needs to be a substantial difference in this field. Otherwise, there would be the dead weight of religiosity without the vitality of spiritual regeneration. I believe that the foremost need of the hour is to shift from religion as a dead obligation, or religion as a set of mechanical observances, to spirituality as a celebration of life, and as Jesus said, life in all its fullness. And it was pertaining to religion as understood in a mechanical sense, and people's sense of burdensome obligation that they have to comply with these prescriptions and practices, that Jesus said, let the dead bury their dead. Since I've done a video on this saying by Jesus, I do not deem it necessary at this stage to consider an examination of Jesus' meaning in this regard, though this is very vital to the theme that we are trying to develop here. So, the main point I want to argue here is that there is a need to seek and attain further clarity regarding the meaning of religion, why we should be religious at all, or what does it mean to be religious. As an aid to this, and in order to accept for ourselves a guiding light or a framework within which this quest, this attempt to understand may be undertaken, let me suggest a parable that Jesus taught as found in the 25th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, the first 13 verses. It is known as the parable of the 10 maidens, or in some versions, the parable of the 10 virgins. Now, the substance of the parable, the textual details are well known, and therefore I need not recount them here in elaborate detail. 10 women are supposedly waiting for the arrival of the bridegroom. Each one of them is carrying a light, but there is a difference between the lights they carry. The lights carried by five of them, or the lamps carried by five of them have oil in them. The lamps carried by the remaining five have no oil in them. So that's the only difference. So the bridegroom comes, but when he comes, only the women who have oil in their lamps is allowed to enter into the felicity of living with the bridegroom. Obviously, this is a parable. A parable is a constructed, improvised story containing a seed of meaning, and therefore, while dealing with the parable, our attention should be focused on the meaning, and usually only one point is made through a parable. A parable does not have an elaborate network of meanings and implications. It's a simple story. Every parable is a simple story housing one particular major profound insight. Now, what is the insight contained in this parable, as also in the other two parables that comprise chapter 25 of Matthew's Gospel? And I believe that this idea is the very seed of religion, and therefore it is worthwhile, it's wise to try and understand it to some degree of clarity. Now, the difference between the wise maidens and the foolish maidens is not in terms of appearances, because from an external assessment, as you see them from the outside, all of them are alike. But there is a hidden difference, and I use the word hidden very advisedly and deliberately because that's the crux of the matter. There is a hidden difference between the two groups, between the wise and the foolish. That hidden difference is that the lambs are complete or whole, W-H-O-L-E, whole, as regards the wise maiden or wise virgins, but the lambs are incomplete in the hands of the foolish maidens. No lamp, to the extent that lamp is expected to give out light, is complete without the oil inside of it. In other words, if there is no oil in a lamp, that lamp is a lamp only in appearance but not in reality. Whether or not it is really a lamp will be proved when the time comes for the lamp to give out light. At that time, you know whether it is a lamp or not. Now, suppose you are walking through a country road, on a country road at night, it's pitch dark, and you have a lamp in your hand and you try to light it. And if there is no oil in the lamp, it gives no light. At that time, that particular lamp is not a lamp for you. It's only an item in your baggage, and actually a useless item in your baggage, which rather than make your journey easier, makes it slightly more difficult. So that's the reason why I say that a lamp, in terms of its functional usefulness or in terms of its relevance to a human need, becomes truly and fully a lamp only if there is light in it, if there is oil in it. Now, what is the spiritual idea here? The spiritual idea, which is what needs to be understood, which is what is often overlooked, to my great surprise. I have to say that I have heard many sermons on this text, but not a single sermon which actually lays its finger on the heart of the matter. What is the significant shaping spiritual idea in this parable? That is the insight that everything needs something beyond the visible and the material to be complete and whole. In other words, nothing is complete in terms of its manifest aspects or dimensions. Or let me now put it in some more philosophical terms. Philosophically, everything that you see in the phenomenal world means world as you see it, the material world, in terms of its physical, corporeal, material realities, the empirical world, the world that you see through your five senses. That's what philosophers mean by the phenomenal world. Now, everything that comprises the phenomenal world, the material world, the physical world, is finite. There is no item, there is no particle, there is no aspect of the material physical world in which we live which is not finite. That is to say, everything that exists within the axis of time and space is finite. Or to use another word, everything in this world is mortal or perishable. There is nothing eternal in this world. So everything is subject to the law of attrition, or to use the religious word, the law of death. So we say, if you are born, you will die. Whatever has a beginning in time will also have an end in time. That's what we mean by saying that everything is finite. Now, God is immortal because God did not have a beginning in time. Time has its origin in God, not God in time, and therefore God is eternal. And God is eternal, which also means that God is complete, God is whole, there is nothing lacking in God. And it is in this sense that universally God is perceived as well as referred to in terms of light. Light is the only symbol that can be attached to God because light lacks nothing. Light is complete. But of course, this is not the eternal light. Eternal light is still different. Within the material world, if there is any phenomenon that comes closest to perfection, it is light. If there is anything which is free from a state of lacking something, it is light. And therefore, from our human imagination and within the limitations of the languages that we have invented, all that we can say, or the best that we can say about God is that God is light. So, the degree of perfection that we associate with God. God is perfect. And therefore, Jesus says, be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Now, whatever is finite is also imperfect. Imperfection is the logic of corruption because whatever is imperfect lacks, by definition, lacks for that very fact or ipso facto something which is vital to itself. I repeat, these are all important points in my logical argument. Whatever is imperfect or something is imperfect because something which is vitally important for it is lacking in it. For example, when God created man, looked at him and said, it's not good that Adam be alone. In other words, God did his very best by way of imagining, fashioning, giving life to Adam, but realized on looking at him that it was not good that he be alone. In other words, there was an element of imperfection in Adam, even though human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. In terms of their experiential life, emotional life, in terms of the essence of their humanity, there is something lacking in them. But the paradox here is what is lacking in them is actually the logic of their thirst for perfection. So when the man by himself is imperfect, and it's good that man be alone, it's not good that man be alone, which means that within the male there is encoded an existential thirst for the female to attain completion, to attain wholeness. What is lacking here is also the means by which wholeness, or a state in which nothing is lacking, could be sought again within the limitations of time and space. I know that there's an idea that needs to be elaborated further, but if I do that, time will get out of control. So, everything that exists within time and space is limited, is finite, is programmed to perish, will pass away. At the same time, God has created everything, and therefore there is an element of the divine attached to everything that is created. To say that God is the creator of everything that we say is also to affirm that there is some kind of connection between the creator and the created. Otherwise, you can't say that this is God's creation. The moment you say that this is God's creation, what you're saying is, whether you accept it or not, whether you understand it or not, you're saying emphatically, you're saying very clearly, unambiguously, that there is a very definite and meaningful connection between the creator and the created. If you are an artist and you do a beautiful portrait, there's a connection between you and the portrait you have painted. That's why it will be called the portrait you have done. It's your portrait. So there is a connection between the creator and the created. And therefore, even though the material world, for aught we can see, is limited, finite, partial, programmed to perish, subject to the law of death, subject to the process of attrition, there is still a dimension to everything in the created order which rises above this. But that dimension, which exceeds the logic of death, the logic of attrition, the logic of entropy, which applies to the whole of the created order, remains hidden from our view. But, and this is the religious insight, for everything that forms part of the finite world, phenomenal world, material world, to be complete, to be meaningful, there needs to be a connection to something beyond itself, of which the plight of man as seen by God is the first illustration. When God, looking at Adam, says, "It's not good that man be alone," in other words, it is necessary that man be connected to something beyond himself, for which purpose God devises Adam out, devises Eve, or creates Eve out of Adam. So also, every aspect, every item, every particle of the created order needs something beyond itself to attain wholeness or completeness. And meaning rests, or true nature rests, only in completion. Now, suppose you know, I'm now 74 years old. Suppose you know 73 years of my life to perfection, every detail. still you do not know me because my life has not come to an end. I may die tomorrow at the age of, say, 74. You've known 73 years of my life, but you don't know the 1 year of my life, and therefore you don't know me. That's a fact. Because in that 1 year, I may have repented and experienced transformation and shifted the very foundation of my life from death to eternity. How do you know? You may know me in terms of my wicked life lived over 73 years, and therefore you would come to the conclusion that this man is doomed to perish eternally. Whereas I have actually repented and shifted to the way of life. Therefore, I inherit eternity. Therefore, between your idea of me and the truth about me, there is a complete disjunction, complete contradiction, complete discontinuity. Therefore, unless and until everything is understood in its totality, you don't understand it at all. That is why we must always remind ourselves that we are living in a world of ignorance. People might say that we are living in the knowledge century. People might say that we are making tremendous strides, tremendous progress in the domain of knowledge, etc. But one fundamental fact will remain. And no matter what progress is made in science, technology, no matter what progress is made in the accumulation of knowledge, specialization and super specialization of knowledge, one fact will remain, and that is we know not. We shall not know anything in this world in its true meaning, true identity, true scope, unless everything in its material dimension, visible dimension, everything in terms of its appearance, everything as it appears to be, everything as it is understood from an empirical perspective is supplemented or complemented with something beyond itself. That beyond itself dimension, what I call the beyond itself dimension. For example, the beyond itself dimension of Adam was Eve. Now, you don't look at Adam, or you can't look at Adam and say, well, if I add, 1 cubit more to his stature, he'll be complete. Or if I make Adam shed a little more of his weight, or if I cause the hair of Adam to grow thicker, more luxuriant, he'll be complete. Not at all. Something completely different. Something that the material dimension, the sum total of the material dimension will never allow you to understand what it is that needs to be added, has to be added for Adam to attain that inner stability and wholeness. So it's only when Adam and Eve become one flesh that both attain that existential equilibrium and therefore the stability and the peace and the joy and the fulfillment that they actually require. So from Adam to the new Adam is a leap which no material worldly logic can enable us to devise or to understand. There, the intelligence, the merciful, loving intelligence of the Creator alone can decide what is it, that dimension which needs to be added to everything that exists in the material realm to enable that to attain perfection. This is how I understand it. Now, come back to the parable. The parable. The women, all 10 of them, are holding lamps. But 5 of the lamps exist purely and merely in the sensual world, not sexual, sensual world. That is, world which is accessed through our 5 senses. If you look at them, there is nothing lacking in them. They are polished, they are good looking, they are very nice lamps, like the other lamps. But there is a hidden dimension in relation to which 5 lamps are not lamps at all. They seem to be lamps, but they are not lamps. In a similar manner, for everything in the material world to attain its true identity, true meaning, true scope, something further than itself needs to be added. And that extra dimension, which needs to be added to everything that is finite, is what is called the infinite. And that infinite is what we mean by God. In other words, from my perspective, or as I understand this parable, or as I interpret this parable, God becomes a necessary dimension for everything in the created order to attain its true form, its true nature, its true scope. And whatever is severed from that complementary relationship with God is not only less than itself, it is not itself at all. That's the whole problem. Just as the lamp without oil in it is not a lamp for all practical purposes, though it could resemble, resemble a proper lamp. For all practical purposes, it is not a lamp. So also, everything in the created order, including human beings, if they are cut off from that dimension of infinitude, dimension of the divine, dimension of God, then we are less than, not only less than what we are supposed to be, we are something other than what we are supposed to be. And this complete change, this total denaturing that we undergo, this total ruination or perversion of the very essence of our being is what is called spiritual death. And it is in this sense that Adam was told by God that if he ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that very day he would die. The reference was not a physical death. The reference was to spiritual death. And the meaning of spiritual death is that we become, in the very essence of our being, something other than what we are meant to be. And in that sense, this whole world is peopled with dead human beings, spiritually dead human beings, and they need to be quickened into life. And the only way this quickening into life can happen is by supplementing and complementing human existence as well as the existence of everything else that forms part of the created order of nature, created order of the universe, with something of the infinitude, something that goes beyond the limitations of time and space. Now, you may argue that this is not impossible. Now, that's an assumption that you make. There is nothing to prove that that argument is right, just as I cannot offer a proof, a scientific proof. I can offer other proofs, other suggestions. Just as I cannot offer you a scientific or empirical proof that everything that's part of the empirical world needs to be complemented with something other than itself. Now, let me give you, however, an illustration which guides my thinking, which in the hope that this also might help you. We all drink water. Uh, we understand water in a certain manner. Water has certain properties. Okay, we talk about the properties of water. But what is water? Water is a perfect illustration of what I've been saying. Oxygen, two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen combine to create one molecule of water, H2O. Two atoms of hydrogen, one atom of oxygen. Neither oxygen nor hydrogen can quench our thirst. So, in relation to human thirst, hydrogen and oxygen are incomplete. They are meaningless. They are like the lamp without the oil. Now, in relation to the thirst of humankind, they need to come together. Oxygen needs to be complemented with hydrogen. Hydrogen needs to be complemented with oxygen. When that happens, there's a complete transformation of both hydrogen and oxygen. And the result is water, the properties of which are radically different from the properties of hydrogen and oxygen. That's the mystery of life. So, if our aim is to quench the thirst of human beings, then you will immediately accept my argument that is necessary to complement hydrogen and oxygen with each other, in a similar manner, there is a need for everything in nature to be complemented with something different to itself, something beyond itself, so that in relation to life upon planet Earth, particularly human life, uh, some the desired degree of completeness or wholeness can be attained. Of course, this is wholeness within the limitations of time and space, and in course of time, this will be dissolved. But for the duration that is meaningful, it will remain whole, and that is the purpose of religion. The purpose of religion is not to attain immortality or eternity here within the domain of time and space. The purpose of religion is to help human beings attain the mercy or blessing of eternity, even as they exist within the fold of time and space. That is to say, the stability, the peace, the sense of worth, the sense of inner equilibrium, the principle of life, if you like, the attributes of life, can be experienced by us within the limitations of time as we live in this world, even though the logic of the world or the limitations of the created order, namely that nothing is complete in itself, is a reality. This reality can be transcended and its imperfections and limitations overcome by complementing everything in it with the other dimension which is completely different from it. In fact, if a lacuna, if a dearth, if an absence is to be made up for, we need something completely different from what that something is. For example, if my needs are to be, if my present deficiencies, for example, I don't understand, say, mathematics very much, though I tried to learn mathematics at some point in my life. So I can't be helped by somebody who is worse than me in mathematics. I need someone completely different to me. I need an expert in mathematics to help me with my mathematics. Jesus said only a healthy person, a healthy physician can heal a sick patient, right? So there must be complete difference between the two if any help is to be derived. Whereas in our stupid inclinations, we always look for people who are similar to us. This is why in all my messages I've been arguing that we must develop the spiritual robustness to relate to whatever is contrary to our natural instincts and impulses, and whatever is different to our nature, whatever is different to our culture, our formation, our assumptions, our presuppositions, because that's the only thing that will help us. So, therefore, the truly religious element or the spiritual element is this: the insight that everything needs to be complemented. In other words, nothing is complete in itself, neither you nor me, nor anybody else in this world is complete in oneself. We all need to be completed. And the only way we can attain completion is by attaining a sense of oneness with God. This is the heart of the religious sense. And the most profound text here is a text that I often refer to because it is so significant. It is so matchless in its relevance to our theme. The statement by Jesus is found in the 10th verse of the Gospel according to St. John, verse 30. I and my Father are one. That is when a sense of completeness is attained, and that's the beauty and power of Jesus' personality. That's the reason why Jesus strikes everyone as divine, though he is profoundly human. You can't think of anyone who is more humane than Jesus. At the same time, as Peter quite rightly says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Or as the Roman centurion perceives in the context of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, he was indeed the Son of God. So, in that context in which Peter realizes that Jesus is the Christ, again, the pattern that I've introduced, the thematic pattern I've introduced, becomes clearer still. If you look at Jesus in terms of what others would see him, he's only a human being. But there is an added dimension to his personality which is not explained by anything this world can explain, the world can offer, and that we can only understand to the extent that our understanding, our cognitive apparatus is formed only in terms of our empirical experiences and assumptions and patterns of thought. We can only understand whatever is germane to the patterns of the world. That is why it's very difficult to understand things spiritual. That's why it's very difficult to accept that there is God, because when we look at God, we look for God in terms of our empirical assumptions and empirical training. We are actually applying to a domain resources, techniques, skills, approaches, etc., which are not relevant to it, which are not appropriate to it. It is like trying to read a book wearing a pair of iron spectacles through which no light passes. Most perfectly shaped pair of glasses, but it's made of most perfectly shaped spectacles, but it's made of iron, so you can't see anything. So I take a book and look, and then say, uh, I see this and say, oh, there is nothing in it. It's all stupid, and I throw it away. Actually, the point is that I'm wearing a pair of iron spectacles. So the problem here is the problem of utter incompatibility between the means I use and the purpose. The incompatibility between means and purpose. Anyway, so coming to the heart of the matter, the truly religious sense, without which there can be no religion at all. True religion, I'm not talking about religion as it is organized, full of superstitions, perversions, etc. Talking about the true spiritual sense is this: the insight that everything in this world, everything that forms of the created order, needs to be complemented with something that's beyond the empirical, beyond the physical. We call it metaphysical, meaning beyond the physical. Meta means beyond. Only then everything will attain its true spirit, true shape, true meaning, true scope. That is why Paul says, he who is in Christ Jesus is a new creation. The old has passed away, the new has come. And the new person that you have become is your true self. Till then, you do not know who you are. That's why a great philosopher like Blaise Pascal, English pronunciation is Pascal, P-A-S-C-A-L, Blaise Pascal, French pronunciation is Pascal, says, except through Christ, I know not my birth, nor death, nor who I am. So I rest my case there. The true meaning of the parable that Jesus taught is that there is a visible dimension and there is an invisible dimension. And the material world attaches value and reality only to the visible dimension, whereas anything that is taken in terms of its visible dimension alone is incomplete. For example, take a tree in nature. Can you have a complete idea of the tree without taking into account the sap that moves within the tree, its trunks, its branches, even the leaves? So, an idea of the tree that excludes the hidden, the invisible, is not the complete idea of the tree. If you have only an idea of the tree that comprises the visible dimension, then you'll never have a mango from a mango tree, or a jackfruit from a jackfruit tree, or a coconut from a coconut tree. So there is a need for everything to be complemented. And there is a need for my personality to be complemented, for me to attain wholeness. Wholeness. That's why Jesus says, abide in me and I in you, and you will then produce much fruits. I hope this meaning is clear. So popular religiosity, irrespective of which religion you practice, is a far cry from this, is actually a flight from this fundamental idea, because this idea can never be elaborated into or limited to a set of rituals and practices. Rituals and practices have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But this was the central idea that shaped the spiritual view of Jesus Christ as well as informed the totality of his public mission. And Christianity is supposed to have derived from it. Unfortunately, Christianity as it is practiced is a denial of this true spiritual sense of life. And what is needed at the present time is a recovery of this lost spiritual sense. I'm sorry, I've taken a little more time than usual, but I had to explain this idea in some detail so that it becomes clear and it makes sense. I apologize for it and I thank you for your patient endurance. All the very best. See you soon.